Good morning everybody, welcome back to Sunday. It's getting down to the nitty gritty now. We're starting to get to the stage where we're putting all the bits inside the box, and it takes a little while, but it gets done eventually, and it's one of the longer processes that we actually do for the box. So before I start, you may have seen on Instagram, those of you who follow our Instagram page, you may have seen I put a feed up the other day about our mini jig. Now this is our mini jig. It's something I developed for cutting butterflies in the top of boxes. So what has, I've been asked many times, can it be used for anything else apart from cutting butterflies? It's a bit sort of, it's a big tool to be using for just that little purpose. Well, yes you can. So keep your eye on this channel for the next couple of weeks, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it to cut a number of boxes. Now there are different techniques we have to use with it. There's different timber thicknesses and blah blah. There's a whole lot of stuff. So we're going to start, and we're going to go through, and we're going to make a number of different boxes with this, right? So there's a whole heap of boxes here. Not all of those boxes are actually made with the mini jig, but I'll show you what else we can do with it. It's not just for cutting the butterflies. So it's just a redevelopment, and just stay tuned, and we'll get you'll get a bit of an insight as to what to do. Usually people who have no space at all in their workshop, or they're working in a little garage, something like that, and you don't have a lot of room to carry a lot of this sort of stuff here, but you still want to be able to practice your woodwork. So the little mini jig doesn't take up a lot of space, but it does do a lot of things. So we'll see as we go through. Now today we have to go back over a couple of things, because I was asked the other day, I put together, if I can find it, I built all the parts for this. Now this is the spaces between that fit into the little tray, right? So it's going to go in there. I built all that, and somebody said, but you didn't show us how to build it. All you did was cut some joints. And I thought, that fair enough. I didn't actually show how it was assembled, how it was made, so I'm going to make another one today. But before I do that, what I have to do is I have to put a base in the tray. Now, the base panel, I had it here somewhere. I think that's it. That was it. So the base panel, when I cut the foot, I've got to get a bit of sandpaper. When I cut the foot, what we had was a little feathered edge around there. Because I used my rebate cutter, and I cut a step in here. Okay, so I used a rebate cutter and I cut the step, but I cut it a little bit high, and I had a little edge all the way around here, which meant all I had to do was just sand off the little bits. It didn't take a whole lot of effort, it was just a matter of just taking that stuff off there. One of the smaller things that you have to sort of fiddle around with when you're when you're cutting specialist parts or specialist pieces on your boxes. So what I wanted to do, it left a round corner on all of the corners, and I didn't want that. And what I wanted to do is, you can see it's got the round corner there, which is the diameter of the router bit. What I wanted was square ones like here, and so I've cut my piece of timber to fit neatly into that space. And when it's squeezed in there, it's going to look quite nice. So it'll look flush and set in there so that it's flush at the bottom. Now the reason I did that, normally what I would do is I would cut a rebate 10mm up here and I'd fit the base in there. But if I did that, it takes away a lot of the space that you've got in here. So it was a bit pointless. So the best thing to do was what I've done. So that brought up another problem. How do I cut my corner square without doing any damage? And that was a little difficult because we don't have a lot of space and we don't have a lot of material that actually is supported around these corners. If I was using a chisel and a mallet, let me get a chisel out. If I was using a chisel and a mallet, there's no guarantee that I'm going to get it straight. Of course it's a matter of skill, but I have to get it nice and straight to do that, right? Now, a lot of people can do that without a great deal of drama, but if you have trouble with that, there's a tool that comes from Carbotech. That's this little gadget here. Now, what it is, it's a little bit hard to see what it actually, it's just a blade. If I press it down, you can see the blade comes out the bottom. Just hold it. Hold it over. It's a little corner piece, and it's sprung loaded. The other thing it has this corner set up here, so that when I put it in the corner, it sits neatly up against the inside of my rebate. And then it's just a matter of punching that with a hammer. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do and fit that into there. So the first thing I want to do is I want to give it some support. I can't just, if I just put that on there and bash it, the thing would flip and carry on, but I don't want that to happen, so I'm going to give it some support. And I need to do one other thing before I do that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a bit of tape around the outside so that it gives it a bit of support. So if I just tape it just gives it that little bit of support just in case anything chips away. Now if I can put that there, clamps. Here again, somebody mentioned last week the value of these clamps. I'll tell you what, I made a mistake when I bought them, or I thought I'd made a mistake when I bought them. I misread something in the blurb that comes with them, and realised that I got these tiny little things. I didn't know what to do with them, and now I know how valuable they've become. And so what I want to do here is just position that into my corner. Now you can't see what's happening because I've got everything sitting there. And I don't know if you can see, but that's cut a little groove around the corner. It's cut it square, nice and square, so now I'm just going to do it again. Sit that back in there. Ow! Got to hit the top of it, silly. Being spring loaded, it doesn't want to. Looks like I'm doing some damage, but I'm actually not. So now I'm going to take out the excess with my chisel. I could hit it a bit harder, but I don't want to because I'm using very thin material and I don't want to do too much damage. So that's just quietly cutting down. As you can see, it's quite thin. It needs quite a lot of finesse just to get that. Now my clamps are in the way. Turn this around where I can get at it.
Oh, that's better for me too.
Just want to clamp this in here so that it doesn't move around on me. So I'm not doing the clamps up real tight, just enough to hold it. So just a little bit at a time, just take your time with it. It's coming out slowly. Actually, I had to thank Dave Stanton for that little corner chisel. I didn't even know they existed until he showed me.
So you have to be careful that you're not cutting too heavily into the bottom of the cutter where you're removing it.
Yeah. So we don't want to break things over here. And I could put the little chisel up there and give it another hit, but I don't want to do that. What I want to do is just go very carefully, take a little piece at a time. I'm just taking it out a little bit at a time. I'm not trying to force it. We all know that if you start forcing things, you end up with a bit of grief. And that means having to repair something. I'd rather not repair it.
Almost there.
Yep. So as you can see, just a tiny little bit at a time. Nearly there. It helps to make sure that you've got a sharp chisel as well. And one thing you must remember with the chisel, it's not a lever. It's designed to cut things. So if your piece of scrap doesn't come out, don't lever it out, cut it out. Okay, we could be close enough to be able to glue this in place. Let's have a look. And that will get glued into there. There's a tiny little bit more to come out of there. Okay. See where it's sitting. Again, we go back to clamping things down, make sure it's all clamped down. It's just sitting up a little bit. beautiful. Now it should fit nicely. Lines up. Okay, so perfect fit. So I might just glue that into place. So a little bit of glue. I'm not going to put a lot on there because nothing worse than having lots and lots of glue coming out. Just a little bit of glue on here. Incidentally, I sanded all of this. It's all been sanded to 600. I'm just going to put some glue in here. Little pieces. Got a little bit of scrap in there. Don't want lots and lots of glue, just a little bit, just enough to hold it in place. It's not as if it's got a lot of pressure on it. Should just about do it, I think. Excess. Now here's a little trick. It's quite a good little trick for when you do something like that. Grab a bit of hold it down, so it's just a matter of hold that down there. Whoop. Actually, that's not wide enough. I might use this piece. A bit of a fiddle, but what I want is the thing to sit nice. And the idea of a piece of baking paper, just greaseproof paper so that it doesn't stick together. It looks really nice in there, so I'll let that sit to dry. And then I'll go on with the next bit. Now the next bit, let's get rid of this stuff. The next bit was with the tray, and now I've built the tray, what I had to do was I had to find how much distance, and I should have done this before I actually glued it all together. Silly me. What's going to happen is we're going to have this set up in here inside the tray. Now I've already done this, so I want to do it for you anyway. what I did was I sat the tray inside here without the base in it, and then I measured from the bottom of the box up to the bottom of the tray. That distance was 15 millimeters. Now, if you remember a couple of shows ago, I cut 2 pieces of support for that tray, and I cut them so that they fitted in there with a miter joint. And so I had these 2 pieces fairly wide. Now, the reason I have them wide is so that I've got plenty to work with, but also it's big enough so that I'm not working really close on a very thin piece of material all the time. Very difficult to do that. It was easier to cut the miters on the ends than it was while it's a wide piece of timber rather than a thin piece of timber, and so I found that a lot easier. I did that on my chamfer bit, which is not something that I normally do. So I used that 45 degrees to cut my 45 degree on the end of here. Now, I don't normally do that. I normally use my shooting board for accuracy's sake, but I gave it a shot and it worked, so I'm quite pleased with the way that worked. But it did leave me with a fair bit of offcut. Now I can use that in another box, but what I want to do is I want to show you how I ended up with the bits on the inside of the box. So if we go over to the drop saw, and I'll set this up. Now, it was 15 millimeters. I'm going to need that because it's fairly close. I'll need one of these. My ruler. Next, grab a LARK tool. And I set my LARK tool at 15 mil. Set that up on here. Now, to get them all the same, what I've done is set on my mark, put the clamp in place, up against the fence, up against the back fence, and I put the second piece on top of it. And just make sure it's hard up against my fence. Right edge. 2 bits. It's just a matter of reset and do it again. To the table. Now, you may think that's a bit of a waste because I've cut an extra set, but this is how it works. A bit of fibre there. Try it the other way. It's better. And then this piece will just pop straight into there. It's a little tight, but that's okay. Just need a little bit of adjustment there, so I probably ended up taking a tiny little bit off the edge of one of those to get it to fit, right? That was the technique I used. Now, getting it out there. Stop playing the game. Okay, so I just need to sand a little bit off one of the ends. So that's, I'll actually use those in another box, so I'll save all those aside. This is what I did. I adjusted it, and these are the ones that I'm actually going to be using. Same thing, just pop straight in. A little bit of adjustment, and that gave me, like I said, it was a bit of a tight fit, but it fitted quite nicely, and you can see that the joints in the bottom of there are really, really nice and neat, and they've come up quite well. So you may need to do a little bit of adjustment every now and then. So that's the setup for the tray. Now the tray, it's been sitting there for 20 minutes, or 10 minutes, so I should be dry enough to actually show you how it fits. Quite nice. Okay, so what I was looking for was this little space underneath there, so that I could fit that in there nice and neat, and you can see there's a little space underneath, which is what we want.
We're just looking at that.
Just looking at the space.
Yeah.
Yep. And then the second one fits quite neatly as well. Okay, and then of course the top goes on. So that's what the fit was. Now, what I had to do, and what I did do, is I built this. Now, somebody said to me, I don't know how to do it. You didn't show us how you assembled it. All you did was cut a couple of joints. And like I said, fair enough. You can see that fits quite neatly into there. So I'll build one of those. I'll do that now, and then we go on to the next bit. The next bit is rounding over the edges on those little tray. So there, I'll just leave it there.
So this box is an exercise in micro engineering, really, isn't it?
Yes, you might say that. Micro a lot. All mini stuff.
Yep. And it's all got to fit together.
It all has to fit together. So I've already cut one for that box, so I'm not going to cut it for again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut one to fit this box. This is another version of that, it's just a bigger one. And if I do it in a bigger version, at least you get a bit of a view of how it's done. So the first thing I need to do is cut some timber that will fit inside the box. Now I want to do it wide enough so that, and again I've got 15mm thickness, so I've already got the drop saw set up for that. But each of those, I'm going to make 4 or 5 spaces, right? So there'll be four partitions that way and 2 this way. So that will give me a fairly spacious setup. So what I have to do is I have to find some timber first. Now I've got some already cut. So I need to cut a piece of timber there, and I need to cut a piece of timber there, big enough to be able to cut all my bits off. So let's do that. First up, so over to the drop saw again. I'm just going to cut. Need a ruler. So my space is, my length is 100, oh, use the right side of the ruler, is 210mm long. 210. Now you'll see why I have the timber at this thickness. I'll talk to you about that in a sec. It's a perfect fit. That's exactly what we want, is a perfect fit. And I need this from across it. It's 149. 149. The laser light on these Caffex are really good value. Perfect fit. Now, to the side, I've got a little bit left over. So what I need now is I need 4 pieces of timber that go across here at 15mm, and I need 2 lengthwise. Again, we set up at 15mm. What I might do is I might just trim up one edge to start with. Same on this one. When I trim up the edge, I do my measuring from that trimmed up edge. No point trimming it up and not using it. So we set at 15mm. I need 2 pieces at 15mm in the length bit, and I've got a little bit left over if I make a mistake. Also, I might as well cut these at the same time. I need 4 bits of this at 15mm. Now if you've got a good saw and you've dressed your material, you shouldn't have to do any more work to it. So there's my 4 bits, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to have 2 here, be 1 there, 1 there, 1 there, and 1 there, and that will give me, these will be a bit closer together of course, but that's basically the idea, and that gives you all your little spacings for your jewellery. Okay, now we just need to set up and cut the rebates. That's nice, and that's nice. So I've got to cut 4 in here, and I've got to cut 2 in this one. And it's pretty easy. All you need is a fence. block of soft timber. Now it's soft timber, and I make that point. What am I doing? And then all you need to do is work out the thickness of your piece of timber has to relate to the thickness of the router bits you're using to cut the rebates. Now I've got a TSRW 6 here, which is what I used last week, for those of you who, and it's the same thickness or the same diameter as the thickness of the piece of timber. So 316, I've dressed the timber down so that it will be exactly the same, and so I'm going to use that to cut my trenches. So the first thing we do is set that up. And now we need to start looking at where we're going to position everything. So the first thing I need to do is get half the thickness of my piece of timber. Now I can do that by eye if I want. I can just set it up and use my finger gauge and give myself a marking. And you can see by doing that I can actually give myself a mark in between two lines. Now some people don't find that all that accurate, so if I just take a ruler and set that at, what was it, 15, so 7.5. Put a mark on there, just turn it around on there with the LARK tool and you can see that's spot on. So we can just set your marking and set your height to that. Now when I set the height for this, what I'm going to do is, you've got two sides of the line. I'm going to set the height of that to the top side of the line so that it gives me a tiny little bit of space underneath. That way I've got a little bit of adjustment if I want to set it differently, or if I want to take a little bit more off. Or easier to fit. Now I run that marking to the sharp point on the router bit. And so it's just a matter of now wind that up till it comes gets a fine adjustment. So a little bit above the line. It's not even 1/2 millimetre above the line, but that will give me an accurate fit. I'll take it a tiny bit more just for sake. The next thing to do is to work out where are they going to be. So on this one I've got to have 4 markings. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to run straight across there. But I need 4 markings on the long ones because we're going to have 4. And they are, and I have to get my box back. I did sit down and measure them so that I had reasonable accuracy. The centre one is a little bit bigger, a little bit wider, and the 2 on each end are exactly the same. So my markings are at 41.5 millimetres for the first one. So let's mark that. And I only need to mark 2 of them. I'll show you why in a sec. 41.5 millimetres. That's to the centre. And the second one was 81.5. Square a line across. Again, we're working in miniature, as Pam said earlier. Everything's tiny when you're working with little boxes like this. So all I'm going to do is set that up to cut. This one needs 2, and those markings will be 50 millimeters from each end. Again, I only need to mark 1. I'll show you why in a sec. Put those aside.
Can you turn the table around for me?
Yep.
Thank you.
Now I'm just going to set the fence so that my marking is the mark is in the centre of the router bit. Use those little clamps again. Make sure that your piece of timber, that your block on the back of the piece of timber is perfectly square in every respect. It needs to be flat on the top, it needs to be square on all the ends, and because it is supporting the pieces of timber. Make sure you check to see that everything is fitted together. Everything is lined up exactly the way it should be. I'm just checking to see it's flush on the bottom. That way I'm going to have accuracy when I cut. So I'll grab myself a pair of earmuffs. Okay, ears on everybody. Too many things to think about.
Yeah. That's better.
So while that's set up at that distance, we want an even distance from the other end. So that's 2. So do the whole lot at once. Just making sure they're hard down, clamped down. Readjust. Not right, but we'll get close. Not quite right, I've just got to readjust again. It's very important that you do make sure that everything is accurate. There we go. No questions, Penny?
Oh no, but Dave says this method is much better than using the Capex in his bin.
Yes, it is.
But this one's more satisfying in terms of your skill level.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
This is more satisfying in terms of using your skills, your router table skills.
Okay. Now, because we had even measurements all laid out, it was quite easy to cut them so they're all actually evenly spaced and large. They should just go straight onto there like that. Might need a little bit of adjustment. I'll get it down in a sec. But that's basically the principle behind how they're built. It's a little bit tight, so I might need to take a little bit off. It's just the a little bit of breakout. That needs a little bit more work. Okay, so I just need to take to one of them with a sandpaper just to get it so that it fits. I don't know why it's not fitting. It is a little tight, but that's okay. That's that one there. Might have just expanded in the heat for today. And a little bit of adjustment by taking a bit off the ends. So it's just a little bit of adjustment there, but that's basically the principle behind how they're made. All right. Just a little bit of work to be done to get that fits. Oh, look at that. There you go. And so we have the setup. Now, let's go back to our smaller one. This is the tray. I've still yet got to make a panel to go in there. You can see I've got quite a bit of spacing there. Same setup, and it's made exactly the same way. Jeff, if you're watching, mate, that's the easiest way I know how to make those sorts of things. So just set your router bit up correctly, set your timber thickness correctly, and then it's just a matter of a little bit of glue to glue the whole lot together. Now once you've got that done, what you need to do is look at it and say, well, okay, that's nice there, but one thing that Pam brought up before was that if she's got a set of earrings in there, getting it out, there's an issue, a couple of issues actually. Number one is the spacing has to be big enough so that she can get her fingers in there. Now she hasn't got very big fingers, but I have, and somebody else may have who's got the box. Getting your fingers in to get them out is one thing. The other thing is that you've got sharp edges all around, all the top edges are all sharp. So what we need to do is do something there just to soften it, just to make it feel a little better, particularly when you're getting stuff out of it. So that's something you need to think about. So what we did, or what I did, was I looked at the router bits that I had, the rounding over router bits. That's not a rounding over bit. Try this one. Now, the router bits that I've got, the Carroll'S ones, of course, the TB504, that's not a TB8, TB2, 502, got it in the wrong packet. Very important to do that, put things in the right packets. The 502, 2mm radius, so it's tiny, if you can see it's not very much. I don't know if can you see that? Not a lot. The 504, a little bit bigger. It's a 4mm, and then you've got the larger one. This one here is the one that we sell in our kit. These ones here we don't sell. I can get them for you if you want me to get you some. But generally we just carry this one here. We start carrying lots of router bits, we get lots and lots of issues pop up. And so what I did with them was this. This was my mock-up to begin with. And I've rounded over, first of all, the timber is thicker. It was way too thick for sitting inside a little box like this. It was way too thick for that. So I've rounded over, just used it as a demo piece, and I've rounded over the top edges of a couple of them. That's the inside edge of there, and those two there, and the inside bits are here. And I did that with the 504. And then I went over it with the 502 with a 2mm radius, and I just turned the edges of it. Now, even on a thick piece of timber, it looks really, really nice. But I decided to do it on a little piece of material the same thickness as what we've got there with the 2mm, and that came up quite nice as well. Okay, so on the 2mm, on the thinner timber, I used a 2mm radius, and on the thicker timber I would have used the 4mm radius. Okay, so the 504 would have been better there. It doesn't look so good on here, but it does look really nice on the thinner timber. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I got that round over, and I'm going to round over the set that I made, and we'll take it from there. So it was the small one, so it was the 204, sorry, the 502. I get my numbers mixed up. I think I need to go back to school.
And so Gary Wilco asked, did you round over prior to assembly?
No. Valid question, Gaz. No, mate, I rounded over after assembly, and this is what it looks like when it's sitting in the box, rounded over. Rounding it over beforehand, I'll get Pam to come in again. If I round it over beforehand, you wouldn't get these little square patches on the middle of the piece. What you would have, you'd have a line across here where the round over came around the corner there. You would end up with a round over here from when you went along there, and that would dip into there, and it'd just have you'd have an edge in there, and that wouldn't look very nice. It looks better with the little square bit.
And what you're going to achieve by doing this is having a smooth transition in the lead up to the crossover.
Correct. Now this one takes a little bit of, you really think this one through, because if you get it wrong you're going to hurt yourself. Well, no, you won't really, but I would rather you took a little time to think it through. The secret to this one is to make sure that you're going against the rotation of the round a bit. Just make sure that you get it sorted. You need to set the height of the tooth. Now I've just got a flat piece of material here, and I'm going to raise up to the piece of wood with the edge of the tooth, top edge. And we can do a test. I'll just find a piece of scrap to do a test on. There's a little piece of scrap. So fingers are going to be close to the round a bit, so just be very careful. You must. So what I'm looking at there, and what I can see there, and this is what you'll probably see as well, there's a little edge there. You can just see it just there. That means the router bit is too high, and I'm cutting into the top edge. I don't want to cut into the top edge, I want to cut into the thing, so I'll drop it down a tiny bit. Oh, not that low. Let's try and readjust. Again. So ears on. That's a little bit better. Just got to come up a tiny bit more. That's it.
It's so fine, it's a bit hard to see.
Yeah, very fine. Perfect. Okay. Now when we do this, we've got to go against the rotation of the router bit. Now the router bit's going to be spinning in this direction here. So if we're going to be working on this side of the router bit, what we need to do is we need to push it that way all the time. So push it that way, push it that way. So you can see how nice that looks now. You've got to round it over, we rounded over the top edges. There, we're doing an inside edge on all of those, just by doing that. Of course they're going to need a little bit of sanding, but it does look quite nice, so it's just to repeat the other side. So we turn it over again. And it's just a matter of a little bit of sandpaper just to tidy up any tear out that you might have. Any little burn marks that might occur. So that's the usual story once you've used the tool. Just check to see that it's done the job you want it to do. And then that will fit in there. I've got it fitting quite snug at the moment. I might need to adjust it a tiny bit. Not always necessary, but that fits quite well. But you can see it's got a really nice thing. I haven't made a base for that yet because, as you saw today, I just glued the base into it. So what I have to do is I have to make a little red panel like that to go into that. So that's how that goes. Now, the third one that I had to do, the third one was a bigger issue. The problem we had here was I've got a very small space underneath here. And again, I had to sit and work out what space I had. And that space in there and that space added together minus this step. Again, back to maths, but I worked it out. And I've made a spacer like that. Now what I did here was I used the same technique I used to cut the crossover, the rebate. I used the same technique to cut the ends as well. The reason you had to cut the ends is so that it fitted in there. So you had to have space for the edges to sit. But I wanted something that was a little higher as a divider. So that sit it in like that. It got the same treatment with the round over at the top edge and the coat of finish, and that fit in there. So that's basically that box. Now all I need to do is dress up this and put a spacer in it. It hasn't got a lift out because generally if you want to take something out of this one here, you're going to have to just grab hold of something in the middle of the box to actually get it out. Again, it's still a piston fit, but it's a nice fit. And then we have these two here that fit together, and then the top goes on it. Now, one thing we did, the last time you saw this box, it had nice sharp clean, I know we've gone over time, nice sharp clean, really sharp edges. And one of the things that I did with it is I rounded over, and you saw that in the earlier programs, I rounded over these edges here, here, under here, and then the bottom edge as well, right? I rounded those over just to soften it, to make it a little bit nicer. That's okay for the bigger box, but the little box needed something different. This router bit, the 502, which has a little 2mm round over, I took the sharp edges all off all the edges, and it made the box stand up a little bit better. It made it feel a bit nicer. It's just got little rounded edges. I could probably do that with a plane if you want to do it with a plane. You could do it with a bit of sandpaper if you like. I just found it easier with the 502 router bit, so the whole lot got done together like that. The only thing I left to do now is to actually make a handle. So that's becoming an issue because number one, we've got to come up with a design, and number two, I've got to work out how to cut it out once we've come up with a design, because I know it's not going to be an easy one. It'll be a relatively complicated thing. It's basically the top of a pagoda. Pagoda
gate.
Blah, blah, blah. And a pagoda. The top of a pagoda gate.
Yeah.
So I have to figure out how I'm going to actually make that. It's becoming a little bit of an issue. I could use a coping saw and just cut it out with a coping saw, but I don't want to do that. I want to do something that's a little bit simple and easy, and but whatever I'm resorted to, it will have to be, it'll have to look good. So that's the only thing that's basically left to there, apart from putting a red base in the bottom of the tray, giving this a sand up and putting a coat of finish on it. I've already finished all of the parts here. You can see they've all got a nice coat of finish on them. They've just got one coat on them. I haven't overdone it or anything like that. I've got to do the top as well. So basically that'll be it. Now that'll be a part of what we do next week. It will be the top and finishing. So that's what's going to happen there. But keep in mind that we're going to be working with the mini jig, our butterfly mini jig, and I'll talk you through that, and we'll go through and we'll be doing a number of boxes, so it'll be over a few weeks, basically because each of the boxes is going to have its own little foibles that we have to fiddle around with. So keep your eyes open for that, and we'll go from there. Now the other thing is, we're going to finish right now, but don't forget the thumbs up. Any comments, add them on afterwards, after the show. I'm sorry we didn't answer the last lot. There were 4 or 5 comments there that we didn't get to answer. We just got too busy, and but I will try to answer them when I can. Comments and thumbs up. So have a good week, everybody, and I will see you all next week.